The following day, YN couldn't go anywhere because Taehyung kept her all day in the apartment he had recently purchased. Taehyung intentionally brought YN there to spend time alone together without their family's knowledge. As a result, In's plan to go to the hospital was cancelled. She eventually decided to send a text message to Haerin, asking for the woman's help to collect a blood sample from Ryu Ji-yoon. Fortunately, Haerin was willing to help. Although Haerin initially refused, YN promised to give her a sum of money as a reward for her assistance. Inside the apartment bedroom, the atmosphere felt incredibly heated. S0 feet M0 at NS began to fill the room as Taehyung once again TOOKP0SS1 on In's body. His hand moved protectively, SQ_UEEZ_ing In's left BR3 at ST, while his lips incessantly SU_CK3D on his lover's N1PPL3 with deep longing. YN actually didn't want this activity to go any further, but the int0 exec at ting T0 UCH of Taehyung's hands made her defenses crumble. She was unable to resist. YN. Ah. Honey. Yang. YN gently GR1PP3D Taehyung's hair, channeling the S3 nanoseconds at T1 on spreading through her body. Taehyung slipped his hand behind In's back, then lifted her body until she was sitting in front of him. YN remained silent with a confused look. Suddenly, Taehyung got off the bed, then stripped off his trousers and ooned 3RW3 at R. YN immediately turned her flushed face away when she saw Taehyung's M at NH00D, which appeared so large and 3R3 court. YN, honey, I already told you that I can't do anything more than this. She said faintly, her breathing starting to become irregular. Taehyung, I'm not going to have S3X with you, baby. I just want you to help me. I really can't H0LDB at CK anymore. Taehyung grabbed In's face, kissing his woman's lips repeatedly with passion before getting back onto the bed and sitting right in front of YN. He reached for In's hand, then guided those slender fingers to GR1P his own. Taehyung, move it like this, sweetheart. He said huskily while teaching YN how to STR0K3 his M at NH00D. YN followed the instructions even though her face grew hotter. Her eyes accidentally stared intently at the M3MB3R now in her GR at SP. Taehyung once again grabbed In's face, kissing his lover intensely before moving down to her chest area, Su_CK_ing on In's N1PPL3 very gently. YN. SSSTTT. Ah. Taehyung moved his face away, then hid it in the crook of In's neck, inhaling his woman's at PHR0D1S1 at C-like scent. Taehyung, F at ST3R, baby. He whispered while M0 at N1NGH3 at Vali. YN obeyed the command. She moved her hand F at ST3R until, not long after, Taehyung reached his P3 at K. A large amount of thick WH1T3 Flu 1D came out, coating In's hand. Taehyung M0 at N3DL0 Udli and G at SP3DF0RBR3 at TH, his body instantly feeling weak after the R3L3 at S3. He reached for a wet wipe available on the nightstand, then diligently cleaned himself and In's hand that was covered in his Flu 1D. Once clean, Taehyung kissed the back of In's hand, then guided her to lie back down and hugged her very tightly. Taehyung, thank you, baby. I love you. YN nodded slowly and kissed the nape of Taehyung's neck. Go to sleep. Taehyung gave a small nod and soon fell fast asleep due to the exhaustion hitting his body. YN remained silent, staring at the bedroom ceiling with a vacant gaze. Even so, her hand continued to move rhythmically, STR0K1 nanogram Taehyung's arm gently. Her mind was completely blank. About 15 minutes passed, and YN was startled when she felt her phone on the nightstand vibrate repeatedly. With great effort so as not to wake Taehyung, she reached for the phone. There were several messages from Haerin reporting that Ryu Ji-yoon's blood sample had been successfully collected. Haerin asked what should be done next. YN quickly replied to the message, saying that one of her subordinates would collect the sample later. Not forgetting, YN forced Haerin to provide her bank account number. She sent a large sum of money that made Heron feel uneasy, but YN insisted that it was her way of saying thank you. After sending a message to her subordinate to pick up the sample from Heron, YN got off the bed very carefully. She walked toward her bag lying on the living room table and took out the syringe she had prepared. With a slightly trembling hand, she inserted the needle into her own vein to take her blood sample. Now she only had to wait for her subordinate to arrive. Fortunately, when the person arrived in front of the apartment, Taehyung was still fast asleep. YN quickly handed over the syringe containing her blood and gave firm instructions. YN, take this blood sample of mine and the blood sample from Heron to the hospital. Perform a DNA test immediately and let me know the results as soon as possible. Three days later, IN's subordinate confirmed that the DNA test results were ready. Without wasting a second, YN went directly to meet her confidant at the hospital where the test had been conducted. Naturally, she went without Taehyung's knowledge. He assumed she was at the office as usual. After receiving the DNA test results, YN drove her car to a secluded city park. She took a deep breath. Her gaze was fixed on the envelope containing the results lying on the car dashboard, while her feelings were in complete disarray. YN remained silent for a long time, just staring at the envelope without moving. Finally, she reached out and squeezed it slightly. For a moment, YN closed her eyes to compose herself. Then, she slowly opened the envelope and began to read. On the first page, the identities of the samples were listed, her name and Ryu Jiun's, complete with laboratory codes and the date of examination. Below that was a table containing a series of foreign-sounding terms, genetic markers with codes like D3S1358, VWA, FGA, and others. Beside each code were numbers representing the alleles of both samples. IN's brow furrowed slightly. She didn't truly understand the meaning of each number listed. However, her gaze soon dropped to the bottom of the page, specifically to the conclusion section printed in bold. The analysis results show a match in DNA profiles between sample A, YN, and sample B, Ryu Jiun, at all examined loci. The probability of a biological parental relationship reaches over 99.9%. IN's breath hitched instantly. The hand holding the paper began to tremble slightly. She reread the sentence, as if unable to believe what she was seeing. That 99.9% figure felt so glaring, as if confirming something that had been making her uneasy all this time. In another section, there was an additional explanation, that every individual inherits half of their DNA from their biological parents, and a match on all tested markers indicates a direct family relationship, such as parent and child. IN's tears fell just like that. Her hands trembled even more, while her chest felt tight as if something were pressing from the inside. YN. I am. Her voice choked. YN. I am that woman's child. She whispered, trembling violently. Her breathing suddenly became erratic. IN's chest heaved rapidly, making it difficult for her to breathe. In a panic, she hit her chest repeatedly, trying to ease the suffocating tightness. Memories of Grandma Ryu's story resurfaced, about what Mrs. Ryu Jiun had endured. Every piece of the story hit her mercilessly, making the tightness in her chest even worse. IN's crying broke out instantly. Mother, she whispered, barely audible. The crying turned into a wail. Her body shook violently, her shoulders heaving as she held back emotions that were overflowing without control. She never expected that, in all her life, she would find out who her biological parents were. YN, who grew up in an orphanage, who all this time thought she had been abandoned, was wrong. Her mother had never abandoned her. On the contrary, that woman was shattered, losing her sanity because she had lost YN. She had even been willing to do things she shouldn't have, to avenge the pain against the person who had separated them. IN's crying intensified as that reality began to connect with another, far more terrifying fact. Her adoptive father was most likely her own biological father. The thought made IN's body grow even weaker. Fear crept in slowly but surely, strangling her without mercy. If that were true, then she and Taehyung were paternal half-siblings. In's body trembled even more. She shook her head slowly, as if trying to reject the possibility, but her mind was instead filled with dark visions. "YN, Taehyung ah," she called out with a violently trembling voice amidst the unending sobs. For more than an hour, YN could only cry and cry in that quiet park. Finally, YN took another big step. She returned to the hospital to conduct a DNA test, this time between herself and Mr. Kim, her adoptive father. A few days prior, YN had taken a strand of her adoptive father's hair left on the middle-aged man's comb. YN had actually been hesitant to do the DNA test. Therefore, for several days after obtaining the hair strand, she didn't do it immediately. However, after knowing the DNA test results between herself and Ryu Ji-eun, YN was finally certain that she had to perform a DNA test with Mr. Kim. Upon arriving at the hospital, YN immediately handed over her own hair sample and Mr. Kim's hair strand to be examined. She requested that the process be expedited, even paying a significant amount to get the results as quickly as possible. The laboratory agreed to her request as a priority examination but still explained that the DNA test results could only come out in 24 hours at the earliest. While waiting, YN did not return to the mansion. She chose to spend her time at the office so that her adoptive family, especially Taehyung, would not be suspicious. When he found out YN would be working overtime, Taehyung immediately offered to accompany her. However, YN refused, reasoning that she wouldn't be able to focus on work if Taehyung were there. An argument ensued for quite a while. Taehyung insisted on staying, while YN stood her ground. Eventually, Taehyung gave in and let YN work late without him. The next day, exactly at 5 p.m., YN received the DNA test results. And the thing she feared most had actually happened. The test results showed the same match as when she was tested with Ryu Ji-eun, an extremely high match, with a biological relationship probability of over 99.9%. That was more than enough to confirm that Mr. Kim was In's biological father. The fact hit In's psyche without mercy. Without a second thought, YN chose to lock herself in a hotel. She turned off her phone and closed all communication access so that no one would know her whereabouts. Inside the silent hotel room, YN broke down. She wailed, letting out all the feelings she had been holding back. This reality didn't just hurt because Mr. Kim was the cause of her biological mother's suffering, but also because of another, far more painful fact, that she and Taehyung were bound by blood. On the other hand, Taehyung was visibly restless as he searched for YN. He had already gone to her office, only to find the place empty. Time and again, he tried to call his lover's phone, but it remained inactive. What made Taehyung even more panicked was the realization that he had suddenly lost track of In's location. A terrifying fear began to haunt him. He was deathly afraid that YN had been suddenly attacked or kidnapped by a rival mafia group. The rest of the Kim family was instantly thrown into a panic once Taehyung informed them of the situation. Without wasting a second, Mr. Kim ordered a large number of his mafia members to sweep every corner to find YN as quickly as possible. By 10 o'clock that night, YN suddenly appeared at the mansion, her face pale and her eyes swollen. Taehyung, who had been pacing back and forth with a tense expression, immediately ran toward YN and pulled her into a very tight embrace. The other family members quickly approached with faces full of concern. "Mr. Kim, what happened? Why couldn't you be reached? Did another mafia group attack you?" YN remained silent, staring at her father with a vacant gaze. "Mr. Kim, YN are you all right, sweetheart? Your face is so pale," he asked in an extremely worried tone. Taehyung released his hug and stared intently at In's face. "Tell me, did something happen to you?" Seokjin and Yoongi, YN both also looked very anxious seeing In's condition. YN, I'm fine. Yoongi, how can you be fine? You clearly look like you're not doing well at all. Taehyung cupped In's face and looked deep into her eyes. What's wrong? You know I hate it most when you lie about how you're feeling. YN went silent for a moment before finally speaking, her gaze remaining empty. YN, I just have a slight headache. Grandma called me to demand I keep my promise. She asked me to live with her and leave the mafia world. If I don't go to Jeju soon, Grandma threatened to come here and fetch me. It will only make the relationship between Dad and Grandma worse if she actually shows up. You know yourselves that Grandma will lose her temper every time she sees Dad. YN intentionally used Grandma Lee's name as an excuse so they wouldn't ask further questions. Sure enough, the men in front of her immediately fell silent, unable to argue. YN, I intentionally turned off my phone because I wanted to clear my head for a moment. After this, I'll find a way so that Grandma doesn't have to come here, and I'll try to persuade her again later to give me more time. Mr. Kim let out a long sigh, looking regretful. I should have let you quit and live with your grandmother the moment she first asked. She's only going to be even angrier with me now. Taehyung and the others remained silent. Taehyung knew all too well that if he tried to discuss the mafia world with his grandmother, it would only end with her falling ill. That was why he always chose to stay quiet whenever she got angry about him still being involved in that world. YN, I'm going to go rest now, she said, then focused her attention on Taehyung. I want to be alone, she said softly. Taehyung sighed deeply and nodded slowly. He let YN walk toward her room without intending to follow her. He then looked at his father with a worried gaze. Taehyung, Grandma's health could drop if we keep arguing about YN. Out of all of us, Grandma is indeed the one who wants YN out of the mafia world the most. Mr. Kim, let's go to the study, we'll talk about it there. Mr. Kim said as he led his 3 sons toward the study. Just like before, YN was forced to lie once again to ease the tension shrouding the mansion. She claimed that Grandma Lee had softened and granted her a little more time to stay in Daegu. That news at least made the atmosphere a bit calmer, though doubt still lingered in the minds of the Kim family men. In truth, they could have released YN from the clutches of the mafia world whenever they wanted. However, there was one powerful reason why they were reluctant to do so. They could not bear to let YN live far beyond their reach. Especially for Taehyung, Grandma Lee's wish was a direct threat to his relationship with YN. Moreover, Taehyung was not yet ready to disclose his romantic involvement with YN to his grandmother. Taehyung knew all too well that such a confession would not only be shocking but could also backfire. Taehyung feared his honesty might cause Grandma Lee to go into shock and fall ill. Days continued to pass, but the atmosphere between them only grew colder. Over time, something began to feel deeply unsettling in Taehyung's mind. For the past few days, Taehyung had started to feel strange because YN seemed to be intentionally avoiding him. The change in In's attitude felt drastic. The woman was now openly rejecting any form of physical contact from him. Far from doing anything more, YN would suddenly become angry and curt every time Taehyung tried to even just hug her. A full week had passed without any warmth between them. There were no hugs, no holding hands. Taehyung couldn't even kiss YN even once. This continuous rejection after rejection began to fuel Taehyung's temper. Until one day, YN returned from the office in a state of utter exhaustion. She immediately entered her room and locked it, hoping to rest in peace. However, as she turned around, her heart nearly stopped at the sight of Taehyung already standing on her balcony, now walking steadily toward her. YN, why are you here? YN asked with a hint of panic. Taehyung looked at YN with a flat gaze that felt incredibly cold. Why? What's wrong with me being in my own lover's room? He said in a heavy, pressuring voice. YN swallowed hard. She began to step backward slowly, trying to maintain her distance. Get out, I want to rest. Taehyung didn't answer immediately. He continued to approach with wide strides, then quickly grabbed In's waist and pulled her until their bodies were pressed tightly together. YN, what are you doing? Let go. YN tried to struggle, but Taehyung's strength was far greater than hers. Taehyung, tell me, why are you avoiding me? He asked while staring sharply into In's eyes. YN, I'm not avoiding you. Taehyung, tell the truth. Don't let your attitude provoke my temper, Kim YN. You are clearly avoiding and refusing physical contact with me. Have I done something wrong? If so, tell me, don't just stay silent and keep avoiding me. YN met the sharp gaze of the man in front of her bravely. I told you I'm not avoiding you, EUMMMPP. In's eyes widened in shock when Taehyung suddenly silenced her lips with a forced kiss. Taehyung held the nape of In's neck, devouring her lips passionately as if trying to vent all his anger from the past week. YN struggled with all her might to resist, but her tears fell just like that when Taehyung instead deepened their kiss even further. Without breaking the kiss, Taehyung forced YN to walk backward toward the bed. He didn't care even though YN continued to struggle in his embrace. Taehyung pushed In's body gently until she was lying on the bed, then he immediately pinned In's body down and resumed devouring her lips, absolutely giving YN no chance to speak. Taehyung began to unbutton In's shirt, causing her panic to reach its peak. YN continued to try and push Taehyung's hands away, but her resistance only fueled his anger further. Feeling rejected once again, Taehyung reflexively ripped In's shirt open, making her shriek in terror. Taehyung began to kiss In's N3CK and roughly SQU*EZ3D her BR34 street. He seemed to turn a deaf ear to In's whimpers and the blows she dealt as she begged him to stop. YN, Kim Taehyung, stop. YN, I said stop. YN gathered all her remaining strength and pushed Taehyung as hard as she could until he moved back slightly. Slap. A hard slap landed on Taehyung's cheek, snapping his face to the side. Taehyung went silent, frozen in shock. YN herself was startled by what she had just done. She stared at her hand, which was trembling violently. In the next second, YN broke into sobs. She turned her body away from Taehyung, weeping silently with her shoulders shaking. Taehyung slowly looked at YN. He rubbed his face roughly, trying to dampen his emotions which were beginning to cool, replaced by a sense of guilt. Taehyung, why have you become like this? What is making you no longer want my touch? We've even done more than this before, haven't we? But why is it like this now? YN didn't answer, only the sound of sobbing could be heard in the room, which now felt chilling. Taehyung's gaze gradually turned mournful. He let out a long sigh, then lay his body down beside YN and carefully hugged her from behind. Taehyung, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. But honey, please don't be like this. Your attitude is hurting me. I love you, you know that, right? We love each other. So tell me what I did wrong, I'll fix it. He whispered in a faint voice. YN covered her own mouth, struggling hard to stifle her sobs so they wouldn't grow louder. How can I say it? I'm already this broken. I can't imagine how destroyed you would be if you found out this truth. Forgive me, Taehyung, because I still love you, but this love has now turned into a terrifying fear, YN thought bitterly. YN pressed her hand against her chest, trying to ward off the suffocating tightness that seemed to be gnawing at her heart. The fact that she still loved Taehyung despite knowing they were paternal half-siblings made the wound in her heart feel many times more painful. That night, they slept together in a tortuous silence. Taehyung no longer forced YN to speak. He simply held her tightly and kissed her forehead repeatedly, trying to convey his affection. Taehyung decided to give YN time until his woman was ready to tell him what was actually happening. The next morning, YN woke up because she felt supple touches landing repeatedly on her cheeks and lips. Reflexively, YN tried to pull away the moment she saw Taehyung's face right in front of her. However, with a swift movement, Taehyung held In's head and devoured her lips so gently. YN could only grip the bedsheets tightly, her brain kept commanding her to stop him immediately, yet her heart felt reluctant. Taehyung slowly broke their kiss, then stared at YN with an incredibly deep gaze. Taehyung, I'll give you time until you're ready to say it. I apologize if I've done something wrong, but please don't avoid me anymore. Don't torture me with this kind of behavior, baby. YN tried with all her might to steel her heart so her tears wouldn't fall. She realized that if she continued to avoid Taehyung so openly, he would surely find out the cause on his own. YN couldn't bear to imagine the devastation that would occur if Taehyung ever discovered the truth. YN, I want us to make an agreement. Taehyung, an agreement? He asked with a confused expression. YN, nothing more. I don't want to repeat anything like what happened at the apartment that time. I can't do it anymore. Taehyung fell silent for a moment, trying to process the request. So, you've been avoiding me because of that? YN turned her face away, then nodded slowly to confirm. Taehyung let out a long sigh, then pulled YN into his arms. I'm sorry. I promise I won't let it happen again. But in return, I will soon tell Dad and Grandma about our relationship. I'll ask for their blessing, and then we'll get married. I don't want to spend too long in a relationship without a legal bond, either. I want to have you completely. In's tears flowed heavily again hearing Taehyung's sincere words. The words that should have been a beautiful dream now sounded like a dagger piercing her heart. No, we can't do that, Taehyung ah. We can never be united in the bond of marriage, YN thought with extraordinary pain. Two weeks have passed. YN lived her days in a manner quite different from before. She no longer wanted to be involved in any work related to her father's mafia group. The Kim family assumed that YN was attempting to slowly distance herself from that world so she could eventually live a peaceful life with Grandma Lee. Mr. Kim himself did not mind if YN wanted to relinquish her responsibilities in the mafia. To him, the most important thing was that YN was willing to stay with him at the mansion just a little longer before finally moving to Jeju. That day, at exactly 4 o'clock after leaving the office, YN did not go straight back to the Kim residence. She rushed to the hospital to check on her biological mother's condition. A sense of tightness always crushed her chest every time she stepped toward that hospital, but the desire to see her mother was far greater. Upon arriving at the psychiatric hospital, YN froze at the doorway. The ward was empty. With her breath racing, she immediately met the nurse on duty and asked about her mother's whereabouts. Her heart sank when the nurse told her that Ryu Ji-yoon had been taken away by a man claiming to be her son. In's anger exploded instantly. She vented her emotions at the hospital staff for being so careless as to release a patient to a stranger without proper verification. In a cold and threatening tone, YN asserted that she would sue the hospital for this fatal negligence. Without wasting any more time, YN immediately sought a hidden spot and opened her laptop. Her fingers moved skillfully as she hacked into the hospital's CCTV system and the street cameras surrounding the location. However, what she saw on the screen made her body go weak instantly. Her eyes widened in disbelief as she saw the figures escorting her mother into a car. They were not strangers. They were members of the Kim family mafia, people who were supposed to be under the command of her father and brothers. An overwhelming fear began to cloud her mind. With a restless heart and chaotic thoughts, YN immediately sped her car toward the main headquarters. All along the way, she kept chanting prayers, hoping her mother was still safe. She couldn't imagine what her family would do if they had already discovered the secret YN had kept so tightly hidden. Upon arriving at the headquarters, YN stepped out of the car in a hurry. She ignored the lines of guards bowing respectfully to her and headed straight for the main hall. The atmosphere there felt much heavier and more oppressive than usual. In the main hall, YN did not find a single member of the Kim family. There were only rows of mafia members standing stiffly like statues. YN, tell me, where is the woman you took from the hospital earlier? She said while staring at the men sharply. The mafia members only glanced at each other and remained silent, making YN truly lose her temper. YN, I asked you, where is that woman? She screamed furiously. Once again, they remained silent. YN, who had lost all patience, immediately pulled a firearm from her pocket and pointed the muzzle of the pistol directly at them. YN, tell me, or I will finish you all right here. Stop it, YN. Someone said in an incredibly cold and flat tone of voice. YN turned and found Yoongi walking toward her. The look in his eyes was so cold it would make anyone's heart shrink in fear. YN, Oppa. Yoongi stopped his stride right in front of YN. He looked at his sister with a gaze that was difficult to interpret. Yoongi, why? YN went silent, her feelings of anxiety reaching a peak. Yoongi, why didn't you tell us that you had found the person who killed Mother Kim? If Taehyung hadn't checked your phone, none of us would have ever known that you found the culprit. This had all started yesterday, while Taehyung was in In's room waiting for her to finish bathing. He saw In's phone continuously buzzing on the nightstand due to incoming messages. Without a second thought, Taehyung opened it. It turned out to be a message regarding hospital bills. Taehyung was instantly confused and wondered to himself, who was YN supporting in a psychiatric hospital? That curiosity led Taehyung to check the entire contents of In's messages. Eventually, his attention was drawn to a message in the archived folder from an unknown number. Taehyung's eyes truly widened when he opened the chat history. He was absolutely livid and enraged to discover the reality that YN had actually found the mastermind behind his mother's murder, yet she had kept it a secret. YN rubbed her face roughly after hearing Yoongi's explanation. She cursed her own negligence. She should have immediately deleted the messages from the hitman so that no one would know. In's body began to tremble violently. Her thoughts immediately flew to the basement. Without thinking any longer, she ran with all her might toward that room, the place usually used for executing the Kim family's enemies. Yoongi furrowed his brow, feeling puzzled by In's reaction, which seemed so terrified, but he quickly stepped forward to follow YN toward the basement. The moment In's feet stepped onto the cold floor of the basement, the sight before her seemed to forcibly suck the oxygen from her lungs. There, in front of one of the damp iron cells, Taehyung, Seokjin, and several mafia members stood tall. In's mind began to race violently. With staggering steps and limbs that felt weak, she tried to approach. Hearing the sound of footsteps, Taehyung turned. His movement was so swift that everyone in the room flinched when Taehyung suddenly pointed his pistol directly at YN. Taehyung, why did you hide it? Is it just because she's insane that you felt pity and didn't tell me? His voice was low, piercing YN with a sharp, stabbing gaze. YN paid no attention whatsoever to the muzzle of the weapon aimed at her. Her gaze was fixed on the iron bars in front of Taehyung. Taehyung, why, YN? You shouldn't have hidden this from me. He growled, the veins in his neck straining. YN remained motionless. She continued to step forward toward the cell. As she drew closer, she saw a hand lying stiffly on the cold cell floor. In's body trembled violently, her face turning deathly pale. With frantic movements, she opened the cell door and reached for her phone to turn on the flashlight. DEG. The world seemed to collapse right then and there. In's body slumped instantly upon seeing her mother lying helpless. With gasping breath and a shaking frame, YN dragged herself closer, then gathered the cold, lifeless body into her arms. YN. Mom, wake up, she said with a broken voice, shaking her mother's shoulders repeatedly. Mom, please. In's tears spilled uncontrollably as she continued her desperate attempt to wake the woman. YN. Mother, wake up, she shrieked hysterically until her voice filled every corner of the basement. Taehyung, Seokjin, Yoongi, and the mafia members present were transfixed. The atmosphere fell silent instantly, leaving only the sound of In's agonizing sobs. Taehyung, mother, Taehyung asked with an expression that seemed dazed. Taehyung turned toward Seokjin and Yoongi in confusion. What does she mean by that? Why is she calling that woman mother? Seokjin, YNA. He murmured faintly, too shocked for words. YN turned, glaring at Taehyung with eyes full of rage and hatred. She stepped out of the cell with a staggering gait, then landed multiple hard blows to Taehyung's chest. YN, you're satisfied now, aren't you? You're satisfied after killing her. Now kill me too, she shrieked while continuing to hit Taehyung with all her might. YN, you wanted revenge for your mother's death, right? You've killed my mother. Now kill me too. I am the source of your mother's death. YN screamed with her remaining strength. Taehyung grew even more silent, he seemed to lose his way hearing that confession from the woman he loved so dearly. His head throbbed as he tried to process the overlapping realities. YN continued to scream and strike until her consciousness slowly faded. Her body went limp, and she eventually fainted. Seokjin and Yoongi quickly rushed to her side. Without wasting time, Yoongi immediately carried YN in his arms. Yoongi, take that woman's blood. We'll perform a DNA test to prove whether she is truly In's mother or not. He looked at Seokjin and Taehyung alternately. Call Father Kim, ask him more about this woman named Ryu Ji-yoon. He said firmly before leaving with YN. Seokjin turned toward Taehyung, who was still standing frozen like a body without a soul. He tapped his younger brother's shoulder gently. Seokjin, we will find the answers. Before meeting Mr. Kim, Seokjin and Taehyung first went to the hospital to submit the DNA samples. They needed irrefutable proof. Since the results would not be out until tomorrow, with hearts still in turmoil, they both rushed back to the main Kim family residence. As soon as they entered, Mr. Kim was already waiting with a displeased expression. Mr. Kim, where have you been? Why didn't anyone pick up when I called? Taehyung did not answer immediately. He stared at his father with a vacant gaze, searching for honesty in the man's eyes. Taehyung, Dad, did Mother ever have a conflict with a maid who worked here several years ago? Mr. Kim frowned in confusion. Why are you suddenly asking that? Taehyung, can't you just give me a direct answer? Mr. Kim, no, your mother was quite close to the maids who worked here. I never once received a report that she was involved in a fight with a servant. Taehyung went silent. Then why? Why did that woman order someone to kill Mother? It's impossible for her to act without a reason, he thought frantically. Seokjin, do you know the background of every maid who has ever worked here? Mr. Kim, of course. I'm a mob boss, I wouldn't let anyone work in this house without knowing their origins. In the past, many enemies tried to plant spies in our residence, so I dug up all the information on them. Seokjin, then, have you and Mother ever had a conflict over a third party? The question made Taehyung turn toward his brother in shock. Mr. Kim scowled in anger at Seokjin's question, but he answered firmly. Never. Neither I nor your mother ever cheated. Taehyung looked deeply at his father, mentioning the one name that now haunted his mind. Ryu Ji-yoon, while that woman worked here, what was she like? Mr. Kim, Ryu Ji-yoon. He seemed to be searching his memory. Ah, yes. She was a naive, obedient, and trustworthy woman. She was the youngest among the workers here and had worked for quite a while. She was also very close to your mother. Mr. Kim looked at both of his sons alternately with suspicion. A few weeks ago, YN also asked about Ryu Ji-yoon. What is actually going on? Are you hiding something from me? Seokjin, Dad, come to the headquarters tomorrow at 10 in the morning. There is something we need to show you. Mr. Kim, fine, but where are YN and Yoongi? Seokjin, they are at the headquarters. We're heading back there now. Let's go, Taehyung. Taehyung, you go ahead, Hung. Sokjin stared at Taehyung for a moment, as if understanding the burden his brother felt, then nodded and walked away. Now, only Taehyung and Mr. Kim remained in the room. Mr. Kim. Taehyung, I know you're hiding something. Speak. Taehyung, are you sure mother was never involved in any kind of fight with Ryu Ji-yoon? Mr. Kim. A fight. I told you, your mother never had a conflict with anyone, let alone Ryu Ji-yoon. What is this really about? Taehyung took a long breath, his voice sounding incredibly heavy. Dad, I have eliminated the person who killed mother. Mr. Kim gasped in shock. What? So you've found the mastermind? Tell me, who? Taehyung went silent for a moment before finally answering softly. It was Ryu Ji-yoon. That woman hired a hitman to take mother's life. Mr. Kim's eyes widened in disbelief. All this time, he had suspected a formidable male enemy. Yet, the person who wasn't even on his list of suspects was the culprit. Mr. Kim. Why would that woman kill your mother? He said in a dazed tone. Taehyung, I don't know the reason for certain yet. That's why I asked you if anything happened in the past that made Ryu Ji-yoon hold a grudge against mother. But, there is something else that is very confusing. Mr. Kim stared at his son with a growing sense of unease. Taehyung, YN suddenly became hysterical when she found out I killed Ryu Ji-yoon. And what's driving me crazy is, YN called that woman mother. YN claimed that Ryu Ji-yoon is her mother. Mr. Kim's body instantly stiffened. What do you mean? Taehyung, I don't know the truth yet, but I'm looking into it. I found out Ryu Ji-yoon was the mastermind by checking In's phone. It turns out YN has known for a month, but she hid it from all of us. Most likely because, that woman was her mother. I don't understand why YN would call her that, and if it's true that Ryu Ji-yoon is her biological mother, how did YN find out? Especially since there have never been any clues regarding the whereabouts of In's biological parents. Mr. Kim grew increasingly dazed, clutching his chest as a sudden, excruciating pain flared within. He gasped for air, his breath coming in ragged bursts as if the oxygen around him had abruptly vanished. Mr. Kim. YN is at the headquarters, right? He asked while struggling to stand with his remaining strength. I have to see her and ask her directly. We're going to the headquarters right now, he said firmly, pulling Taehyung's hand. Reluctantly, Taehyung followed his father, whose steps appeared fragile yet filled with grim determination. Upon arriving at the headquarters, the atmosphere was chilling. In the main hall, they found YN sitting in a daze. Her gaze was vacant, yet tears continued to stream down her pale cheeks. It turned out the girl had regained consciousness. Mr. Kim approached with steps that felt incredibly heavy, as if every stride bore a weight of several tons. Mr. Kim. YN, he called out softly. YN gave no response whatsoever, as if she had completely shut herself off from the outside world. Mr. Kim. Turning In's body to face him. Tell me, is it true? You found the person who killed your mother, but you hid it and didn't tell us at all. Mr. Kim stared intently into In's still vacant eyes. Mr. Kim. In, he snapped, trying to pull his daughter back to reality. YN, slowly turning toward Mr. Kim. She's dead, so now we're even, right? Then what's the point of asking about things that don't matter anymore? Mr. Kim looked at YN with a deeply wounded expression. It was as if he no longer recognized the girl in front of him. The figure before him now felt like a stranger trapped inside his daughter's body. Mr. Kim. Why did you hide it? I must know your reason. YN went silent for a moment, averting her gaze from her father. Mr. Kim. YN, she was my mother, my biological mother. Because she was my biological mother, that's why I hid it. In's confession caused Mr. Kim's shoulders to slump instantly. The middle-aged man's eyes welled with tears. What kind of destiny was this? The girl he had raised with such overflowing affection turned out to be the flesh and blood of the woman who had taken his own wife's life. YN, if you're asking for the root of the problem that led my mother to kill Mother Kim. YN looked at Mr. Kim, her tears streaming even faster. The problem lies with me. I am the root cause, and all of this happened because of your mistake. In's words left everyone in the room, including Taehyung, Seokjin, and Yoongi, utterly bewildered. Mr. Kim's face grew increasingly pale. Mr. Kim, what are you talking about? YN ah. YN, staring sharply at her father, a gaze radiating a wound so deep. If you hadn't touched my mother, none of this would have ever happened. YN, if you hadn't touched my mother back then, she would never have endured the long, agonizing suffering she faced all this time. And I certainly would never have felt the bitterness of growing up without biological parents since I was a child. DEG. Taehyung stepped forward, his emotions surging. He gripped In's chin, forcing the woman to meet his eyes, which flashed with a mix of fury and disbelief. Taehyung, what kind of nonsense are you talking about? He said in a low, pressuring voice, staring at YN intensely. YN looked at Taehyung as her tears fell even more heavily. She grabbed Taehyung's hand that was gripping her chin, then squeezed his arm with an unbearable trembling. YN, you know very well how much I love you. But, you never knew how I cried every night, thinking about our complicated relationship. You didn't know how hard I tried to look fine in front of you and everyone else. I kept wishing this was just a nightmare, Taehyung ah. I wished I could wake up from this painful dream soon. YN took a breath that felt suffocating, as if the air around her had completely run out. YN, you asked why I was avoiding you before, didn't you? This is the reason. You, I, and our parents are a destiny I never wanted. This time, we cannot fight fate. You and I are truly only destined to be siblings, not a pair of lovers who love each other. Everyone in the room was stunned. Mr. Kim stood frozen, his heart pounding in shock upon learning that his two children were in love with each other. However, what hit his soul the hardest was In's confession that they shared a blood connection through him. Taehyung's grip on In's chin slowly weakened. He stepped back, staring at the woman before him with a vacant gaze, as if his world had just collapsed. Taehyung, stop talking nonsense. He said coldly, though his voice sounded fragile. Mr. Kim, YN AAA. He murmured faintly, his hand clutching his chest, which felt increasingly tight. YN, turning to look at her father with her remaining strength. Taehyung has already taken my mother's life. Now we're even, right, Dad? I will try to discard this hatred, considering all the kindness you've shown me all this time. YN tried to stand tall even though her legs felt weak. YN, please let me take my mother's body. Please don't make this difficult for me, she said with a violently trembling voice. YN bowed respectfully to Mr. Kim for the last time, then turned to leave. However, her movement was halted when Taehyung grabbed her wrist roughly, pulling her so that YN was forced to turn back. Taehyung, you. Taehyung stared at YN with eyes reddened by anger and sorrow. You. YN, do you still not understand? YN, Ryu Ji-yoon was a maid who once worked in your house. She quit back then because she was pregnant, and the baby she was carrying was your father's child. Mrs. Kim was furious when she found out Ryu Ji-yoon was keeping her husband's child. She went as far as kidnapping the baby and abandoning it on the street near the orphanage where Yoongi and Seokjin Oppa were raised. Ryu Ji-yoon thought Mrs. Kim had eliminated her baby. Because she had no power, she desperately hired a hitman to avenge her heartache. YN, and that baby of Ryu Ji-yoon, is me. Mr. Kim rose to his feet, staring at YN with overflowing emotion. What are you talking about, YN? I never touched Ryu Ji-yoon. Where did you get this nonsense, huh? He roared in fury. YN, nonsense. YN looked at her father with eyes full of rage. Then let us prove it with a DNA test. Those words made Taehyung stagger back, as if the ground beneath him had just split open. YN, I have proven it myself. I even still have the DNA test results. I don't need your confession, Dad, the point is, I've said everything. Now, let me go and take my mother's body. Taehyung, you. Taehyung stared at YN with a look so shattered. You. YN looked at Taehyung with a wound just as deep. We are paternal, half-siblings. We can never be together. YN, glancing at Taehyung briefly before turning her back on him. We are even. I'm sorry if I seem ungrateful, but please forget all relationships between me, Dad, and Taehyung. Let's live our own lives. Once again, thank you for raising me well. I consider my debt to Mr. Kim paid in full with my mother's death. Without looking back, YN walked away, followed by several of her subordinates carrying her mother's body. Taehyung's body instantly collapsed to the floor. Taehyung, no, she must be lying, he murmured while shaking his head, trying to reject the bitter reality. Mr. Kim, YN ah. Yoongi and Seokjin closed their eyes tightly, never imagining their family would be destroyed this completely in the blink of an eye. Seokjin, Dad, I still have In's blood sample. You can prove it yourself with a DNA test. And earlier, YN mentioned that if you want to hear a more detailed explanation about Ryu Ji-yoon and Mom, you can meet Grandma Ryu, Ryu Ji-yoon's mother. She is currently living in Jeju. The atmosphere at the headquarters suddenly fell silent, leaving an overwhelming sense of suffocation for the Kim family men who had now lost their way. Mr. Kim was completely devastated. He chose to lock himself away, trying to process the truths that were hitting him one after another. Meanwhile, Taehyung was struck once again when the DNA test results between Ryu Ji-yoon and YN came back. The results positively stated that they were biological mother and daughter. Now, Taehyung's mind was consumed by an overwhelming fear. If what YN said was true, then they were blood-related, a reality that would kill his feelings alive. 2 days later, Taehyung, Seokjin, and Yoongi sat in the living room in a chilling silence. They were waiting for their father to open the envelope containing the DNA test results between Mr. Kim and YN. Taehyung, why haven't you opened it yet, Dad? He asked in a flat, cold tone, despite his internal turmoil. Mr. Kim remained silent, his fingers holding the envelope trembling violently. Over the last 2 days, a faint fragment of memory had begun to flicker in his mind, a memory that had been buried beneath bad recollections for years. He remembered a morning when he woke up in a guest room without a stitch of clothing. Mr. Kim did have a bad habit of stripping off his clothes when heavily intoxicated, but at that time, he hadn't felt anything unusual. There was no scent of intimacy, no suspicious marks. He had assumed everything was normal, until today. Taehyung, Dad, Taehyung called again, this time his tone much sharper. Mr. Kim snapped out of his reverie. With a heavy breath, he tore open the envelope bearing the hospital logo. His eyes scanned the rows of words on the white paper until he reached the conclusion line at the bottom. Seokjin, Dad, he called out in concern as he saw Mr. Kim begin to shake his head while clutching his chest. Mr. Kim, YN, Mr. Kim burst into tears instantly. Taehyung gripped the arm of the sofa until his knuckles turned white. His pale face now looked tense as he awaited certainty. Mr. Kim looked up, staring at his youngest son with a face flooded with tears. Mr. Kim, I'm sorry, Taehyung ah. Forgive your father. Taehyung bolted upright from his seat, his breath hitching. Taehyung, I still don't understand any of this. YN suddenly becomes the child of that murderer, and now you are her biological father. Are you all playing a joke on me? This is absolutely ridiculous, he shouted, his voice rising. Taehyung, for years I searched for that murderer, and it turns out. He smiled bitterly, a laugh full of pain. It turns out she was very close to me. Dad, or perhaps you, actually knew everything all along but hid it from me just to protect YN and that woman. Mr. Kim, watch your words. You know exactly how I've been all this time. Taehyung ah, I truly wasn't conscious, I don't remember that incident at all. I only remember waking up without clothes, but nothing was suspicious. There were no signs that I had touched Ryu Ji-yoon. Taehyung, clenching his fists tightly. Then who is to be blamed here, Dad? Yoongi, what's the use of blaming someone now? Everything has already happened. This is fate. Neither Dad, you, nor YN wanted this to happen, right? Taehyung's previously pale face now turned red with peaking rage. No, if Dad hadn't been drunk that day, none of this would have ever happened. Without another word, Taehyung turned and walked away with wide, emotion-filled strides. Mr. Kim, Taehyung AAA. He shouted, trying to follow. Seokjin, Dad, let us go after him. Don't worry, Mr. Kim only nodded weakly, letting Seokjin and Yoongi run to chase Taehyung, who was now consumed by a storm of anger and despair.